So, as I said in the last podcast, we will look at table first in terms of recommendations for improving the SSP RCP framework and the issues each would benefit. So, oops, I lost my cursor here. Ta-ta-da. What the hell? Okay. There we are. So this is a summary, so we'll read some words as well which give you a better idea of what the authors intend in terms of recommendations. So here are the recommendations and what are the issues each recommendation would benefit. Improve climate and societal integration. Improve regional applicability, which is my favorite one because all global warming is local, all impacts generally are local. Nobody lives in the global mean temperature, global mean sea level rise and so on. So we have to understand what happens not only over India but in each corner of India or each region in India. So that's very critical. So these are the scenario framework needs. So improve relevance beyond climate. Improve use in policy research, capture relevant perspectives. We'll read a few words about each of these as well. Keep scenarios up to date. So this is again a key question, whether this framework should continue, and with all its engagement of enormous number of climate scientists and computing resources, is it really worth churning out these scenarios out to 2100, or can we move to making maybe decadal forecasts and then keep moving by adjusting our thought process, except for some infrastructure, like you don't want to build a port for 10 years, it should last for 100 years. You don't want to build a dam or a hydroelectric power station for 10 years. So there are some things which need future projections, but there is the uncertainty and the discount rates we have to worry about, right? And improve relevance for users. So who are the users? Are they governments? Are they subnational governments? Are they big firms? Are they militaries? Who are they? Are they individuals? What scale can we go down to? Okay, so I won't go through each of these. The tick marks and the pluses have some meaning here. Tick marks indicate recommendations made to address the issue in the indicated column, and plus signs indicate benefits to additional issues in other columns. So modify current framework, extend SSPs to include additional quantified indicators of vulnerability and resilience. This is a great idea because this is what is needed to make sure we are moving towards climate resilient societies and reducing vulnerability, which also means being equitable and just, so that even the most vulnerable, not only countries but regions of countries, are being moved into higher resilience. Integrate physical climate storylines into the framework. So right now they kind of ran parallel and then combinations were tried. Extend the framework to support adaptation pathway development. That is a kind of a big challenge in terms of what exactly it means. That could improve climate societal integration, but how do you bring finance? If you provide pathway, then there are other issues to worry about. Can everything depend on technical feasibility or economics cost-benefit ratios, or do they have to include non-market values like well-being, for example, or ESG, environmental, societal, and governance issues, etc. Right? Extend the SSP narratives to cover key international societal and environmental goals, such as SDGs and CBD targets. Okay, so this is a convention on biodiversity that we didn't discuss here much. SDGs are of course the Sustainable Development Goals that I have many podcasts on elsewhere, and we'll have some more in terms of where we are in 2023 compared to the sunset of 2030 and where we are supposed to be and so on. basically the news is not so great. Improve scenario develop. So this is under modifying the current framework. In terms of improving scenario development process, I'm not going to look at these. We'll come back and read some words, as I said, about each. But you can kind of try to see what they are supposed to address and what additional benefits they will have in each case. In terms of improving scenario development process, connect the SSP RCP framework to parallel scenario activities using scenario archetypes. Okay, you have to read the text carefully to see what that means. So the scenario archetypes are the, let's say, the most salient ones, and you want to combine the SSP RCP framework to parallel scenario activities. So you mean it means that you have to decide, in some sense prioritize. Right now, as I said, many models have chosen many scenarios without any coherent strategy, and then all the models with unequal number of scenarios are combined to produce, let's say, AR6, and was done with RCPs for AR5. What do we do with these? So how can we connect this framework to parallel scenario activities by creating scenario archetypes? So they could benefit improving relevance beyond climate, for example, and have co-benefits to improving the use in policy research and capturing relevant perspectives. Okay. Define and promote the use of shared policy assumptions for both mitigation and adaptation, which is meant to improve use in policy research with other co-benefits. Make the scenario development process as inclusive as possible. There is lots of criticism that the RCP SSP scenario development has been dominated by the global north or the Western world, and in fact it misses a tremendous amount of issues for the global south. So there are papers coming out of India, let's say from I think it's TV Jayan and or T Jaya Raman and Kajal Kanitkar and so on, good social scientists. One is a physicist turned social scientist. So there are many good points to be made there for inclusive development of scenarios. Establish a process for regular updates of the scenario framework. Again, this is about the cost benefit of the scenario approach itself. Okay, so this is of course important for keeping scenarios up to date. You notice I kept now I've basically switched to saying process instead of process. I don't know why I did this. Jim Christian keeps coming to mind, I suspect, in some subliminal way. Haven't seen him or talked to him for a long time, so there we go. Connect to users and other research communities. So I lost the top column, but it doesn't matter. Develop community consensus on methods for working with SSPs across scales. So scales or granularity is very critical to make them relevant, useful, and usable at adaptation scales, which tend to be local and regional. Develop sanctioned regional scenarios that can be used across organizations. So regional scenarios then have to work across governments, public-private partnerships, and international coordinations as well. For example, there is no reason why Indian subcontinent has to work separately. Geopolitical tensions exist. Even China has to worry about what happens in this region, but these hegemonies and imagined competitions obviously are disruptive to climate action together, and it's not clear if each country does its best for climate targets, it'll add up to being global community reaching the climate targets. So these are details one has to worry about in terms of scenarios that can be used across organizations. Raise awareness of the relevance of the SSPs to societal objectives beyond climate change by widely demonstrating how they can be restructured on alternative axes. This is very critical because countries are submitting nationally determined contributions, they are revising, and then we are saying that's still not good enough to meet the 1.5 or 2 degree C targets, and we are not very sure exactly what will happen if we cross these targets, how long can we cross them before coming back, and so on. So models are not extremely good at producing local impacts of these global warming targets. So that's a tricky thing as well. So application to other societal objectives will be very critical in that sense. Develop guidance materials and online repositories to foster interdisciplinary collaboration and capacity building. So guidance material and online repositories, how they will look and how they will be made useful. So that's supposed to benefit the third column, which is improving relevance beyond climate, right? So create climate change scenario services to cater to needs of users. So we have weather service, which is successful because people know how to use them by looking at them for over a long time, and they have gotten, skill has gotten better, at least in mid latitudes, because climate weather has predictability out to 5 days and 10 days and so on. In the tropics, this is still to extend beyond 3 days, but for people to be able to use weather services needs multiple years of exposure and their own risk assessment. Then come climate services, which include things like extended range forecasts for active break periods, agricultural advisories, crop selections, or El Nino forecasts to prepare seasonal outlooks, to prepare natural resources, manage food security by altering export policies of sugar and wheat and so on and so forth. And then you have climate change scenario service to cater to need of users. So you have to figure out what the user, how the users are actually perceiving climate change scenarios, how useful they think they are, and who these users are, and then what they will demand. So climate change scenario developments, as we discussed, have interacted with governments, and now we have debates about whether we are bending over backwards and sacrificing scientific robustness to meet government demands in terms of scenarios for the future. And then we are going to create climate scenario service that has to be developed carefully as well, but that will benefit improving relevance for users. New research recommendations for our SSP RCP framework. Develop improved regional climate information. This is across the board very useful, but what the uncertainties are when you go into the future at regional scales remains very tricky. Develop a more diverse set of global SSPs as boundary conditions for multi-scale analysis. Okay, so SSPs as boundary conditions, so basically we are going to do some sort of a downscaling to sectors or regions or time slices, let's say for energy, transportation, food, bioenergy, and so on. Then you need a more diverse set of global SSPs as boundary conditions. This would benefit here, for example, improving regional applicability. Consider how scenarios can best account for future shocks. Develop new reference scenarios including relevant climate policies and impacts. So impacts is going to benefit, improve the use in policy research, and better understand needs for sustainable development policy analysis. So we keep on hammering this policy application, but it's very tricky. Are the policies really implemented, enforced? Are they guidelines? Are they guardrails? So on. Evaluate uncertainty range covered by frameworks and by the framework and possible missing futures, which is necessary for capturing relevant perspectives. Okay. Finally, consider alternative methods, techniques, and processes to cover relevant futures and ensure the legitimacy of the whole process, which will benefit multiple things, but mainly will look at the fifth one, which is the capturing relevant perspective. Okay, so I think I'll leave this podcast here, and then we'll read the words on needs and recommendations, and then we'll have another podcast looking at impact of COVID-19 on this whole IPCC process, which obviously delayed the release of AR6 and also had will have future impacts and has many lessons. I've covered COVID in many other podcasts, so you can look at, and I also have a invited editorial in Current Opinion and Environmental Sustainability about how we did in terms of using regional Earth system prediction framework for dealing with the pandemic. Lots of disease modeling was done. Were they really useful? There is some arguments that they were, but there is lots of criticism about why they were not so useful. And of course there is the problem of data, because to run many of these disease models, especially infectious disease models, you need data and you need near real-time data to see how people are moving, how diseases are moving, and so on. So pandemic is now a big part of this whole climate action and societal response, and how scenarios can be impacted by perturbations like the pandemic. Okay, so we'll come back and discuss that at the end. Okay, let me leave this here.